All right, this story keeps getting wilder and wilder. We just got a new update out of the Daily Mail that the White House actually knew about the racist group chat a few weeks before the Politico article dropped, but rather than reprimanding the people in the group chat or trying to distance themselves from the people in the group chat talking about gas chambers and rape and just a bunch of sickening stuff about black people and other minorities and gay people, rather than reprimanding that, the White House decided to place pressure on the guy who was leaking the text, the guy who actually brought these texts into the public. The Daily Mail reports racist text scandal explodes in the White House as, quote, mob boss staffer goes scorched earth with twisted revenge plot. So they're trying to say that this is some sort of revenge plot. Let me run you through the story. Then I'm going to bring in Micah because we need to talk about this rise of far right's, ideology in the United States. And I know that you guys have seen it for the past decade, but over the past year or two, there is something darker, something new that is really sprouting up. It is this Nick Fuentes faction of the GOP that is now very much so becoming normalized. We'll talk about that later, but let's start here. The White House has descended into chaos after a top admin official was accused of leaking racist text messages. The damaging leak exploded onto the national stage on Tuesday after the Politico article dropped, and it was the young Republican club calling black people "quote unquote" monkeys. It's despicable, and praising Adolf Hitler. Gavin Wax, a State Department staffer, allegedly orchestrated the takedown of his former colleagues at the conservative club, insiders told the Daily Mail. Now, the framing here is weird. This guy orchestrated it, or he just released text messages and let it happen. So, senior White House figures urged Wax to retract his leak last week as word of Politico's scoop spread, according to 4 Republican officials familiar with the situation. Here lies the problem. This is insane in and of itself. Rather than reprimanding the people, or even condemning the people who were doing this, they try to go for the guy who leaked this. And this is a problem with the Republican Party. Not only do they create the permission structure for people to say stuff like this, but they even elevate these people to the highest levels of the party. Donald Trump is currently surrounded by Stephen Miller, a crazy ideologue who's saying insane stuff. He's surrounded by Caroline Leavitt, who just said this yesterday about the Democratic Party. Just listen to this part.
Proved that the Democrat Party's main constituency are made up of Hamas terrorists, illegal aliens, and violent criminals. That is who the Democrat Party is catering to, not the Trump administration and not the White House and not the Republican Party, who is standing up for law-abiding Americans, not just across the country, but around the world. And that's
The gaslighting is insane. So they're going to ignore the extremists in the Republican Party. The people who raided the Capitol at the behest of Donald Trump, who is number one extremist. He is the number one extremist. Literally, he's sitting there telling people the election was stolen, they have to take their country back on January 6th while Mike Pence is certifying this. And while Mike Pence is certifying it, they go in, they beat cops. The point is, how are you going to try to paint the Democratic voter base as extreme when that's your voter base? How are you going to paint the Democratic voter base as Hamas supporters, terrorists, and criminals? I'm only 2 of those things. I'm joking. No, I'm joking. That's a bad joke. I'm none of those things. No Democrats are any of those things. This type of broad, sweeping generalization of an entire political party is the exact problem with our politics. Caroline Leavitt, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, they operate as if they don't want the Democratic Party to exist. They don't want the Democratic Party to exist. That's why they sue law firms that are Democratic. They're suing Act Blue. That's why they're trying to take down universities. They don't want the Democratic Party to exist, and that is fascism. Now, I'm going to bring in lead policy advisor Micah Erfan. You're going to want to stick around until the end and drop a like on this video. So, Micah, let me get this straight. They decided to reprimand the guy who was leaking the group chat more so than the people who were actually in the group chat. Am I right?
Right. They had notice of this leak a week before the story was released by Politico. And instead of confronting the racists, the neo-Nazis, the people calling African Americans monkeys, they confronted the leaker, Gavin Wax, who is actually an employee of the Trump administration.
Yeah, and this creates a permission structure from the top down when not only conservative politicians like J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller and even Donald Trump don't condemn this, but they actually go after the person who is going to leak it. What that signals to people, especially young people across the country, is that you now have permission to act in a certain way or to say certain things. And this comes at a time when we kind of need moral clarity as young people, as young men in America who have, gone through COVID, some crazy stuff. Trump has been in our lives since we were kids, unfortunately. The very least, we just need some moral clarity on what's fine and what's not fine. And when the vice president is signaling that this stuff is fine, it's not good.
Yeah, JD Vance just a couple of days ago actually implied in an interview that the person who leaked this, Gavin Wax, is a scumbag, right? And so you should never leak your friends doing terrible things, people being Nazis. The message from the Trump administration post this terrible discovery that Politico has made is that loyalty is incredibly supremely important. Everyone on the right, no matter how far right, no matter how extreme they are, should be protected at all costs. There is no policing of their own side. Nazis are on the right. And I think this is actually the craziest thing. They've told us for decades that Nazism is a left-wing ideology, that fascism is a left-wing ideology. Meanwhile, we expose actual, open, explicit fascists and Hitler fans on their own side, and all they can do is defend them and say, no enemies on the right. We're going to defend our own from the left. That's just a concession that we've been right this whole time, and they've been lying.
And they also try to gaslight us by downplaying the severity of the situation. JD Vance keeps referring to this as just a few kids who were making jokes. That's not the situation. They were 30 to 40 years old. This group chat comprised of policy advisors. This group chat comprised of people who worked in Republican campaigns. These were not just 19-year-olds who were being edgy. These were 32-year-olds, 35-year-olds who knew what they were saying. And it's actually indicative of a broader shift that we're seeing in America. So some people watching this video may have over the past few months learned about the Groyper movement for one reason or another. My audience is actually very diverse in age. I have people of all ages. So some people aren't as, let's say, in-depth in this new internet culture as we are. And that's a good thing because then we can go relay the facts. And as someone who's in-depth in this internet culture, there is a shift that's happening that we need to be aware of. People like Nick Fuentes, those far-right people, are becoming the more normalized MAGA conservatives, if you want to call them that, like the far-right conservatives. Meanwhile, the people like Ben Shapiro, who you may see as extreme, people don't like, but trust me, Ben Shapiro is now a center-right. He always has been center-right. He's basically a moderate in the MAGA movement. There is a dark undercurrent boiling in the GOP of young people, not just 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds, but 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds who are embracing this type of Nazi rhetoric. And it's going to get bigger, unfortunately. It is not slowing down. Nick Fuentes is getting more and more access to different podcasts. He's influencing more people. I see people that I went to high school with like liking and reposting stuff. And I'm like, I know that you don't actually believe this. How is this becoming so culturally dominant? So Charlie Kirk was right wing. He was decently right wing. He was pretty far right. But Nick Fuentes is far right.
Right. And Nick Fuentes hated Charlie Kirk because Charlie Kirk was too moderate.
Yep.
Right. And so we see a huge growth of the far right. And we also see a lot of right-wing creators going further and further right to try to appeal to the virality and get the clicks and appeal to the most extreme part of the right, which pressures them. We see that with Matt Walsh, who's actually part of Ben Shapiro's company. He's a very high-profile right-winger, and he keeps beating the drum. No enemies on the right. We must be completely unified. And he's explicit. That includes neo-Nazis. So that's where they're at. And I don't think that most Americans are aware of this. And it's our responsibility to tell them, right? For the longest time, they have been told that the right is not fascist. We're misrepresenting them. And the left is full of extremists. Meanwhile, the left's politicians are so normal. like what do we want? We want more healthcare for people. We want to protect our democratic institutions. We don't think the FCC and the government should be weaponized against our political opponents. We believe in a fair democratic system where every vote counts. This is what we're fighting for. They're fighting for the most far-right extreme agenda possible. I'm sure you saw this, Adam. The DHS account, ICE, they tweeted, re-immigrate the other day.
Yeah.
Re-immigrate is a term that comes from Europe. It's a European far-right movement which wants to deport not just illegal immigrants, but their children too, so long as they're not white. They want a purge of non-white people out of Europe. And now our government is using their terminology because that's their agenda too. That's how extreme they are.
That is disgusting. It actually kind of just like freaked me out because this is getting big. And our quote unquote extreme politicians are Bernie Sanders, who's always just like, billionaires, let's take the billionaires and tax them more. Those are our quote unquote extremists. Their extremists are like, re-immigrate. Every brown person gone. There are Jewish space lasers controlling me, and I want Jewish brown people gone. That's their far right politicians in power. So there's a fundamental incongruence, and we have to keep calling it out. Everybody, make sure you check out Micah Erfan in the description below. Micah, thank you for hopping on. We'll do it again.
Thanks, guys.